Hello, welcome to Paint by Blunders. Today we will be looking at the Death Korps of Krieg and the engineer models, and this is essentially just meant to be a video just to show you some different colour schemes that you could use. When I did the artillery piece I did them in like a blue colour, and this is the red. There will be future videos where I'm hoping to do more of a tan desert theme and also a jungle theme, so do look out for those. If you are new to the channel, do please consider subscribing and giving us a thumbs up if you enjoy the content, because it does help the channel grow a lot. Enough of my waffling. Thank you very much. Let's get to the video. So here is our Krieg engineer. All I've done primer wise is airbrush some black and then some grey over the top like a zenithal. And then we're just going to come in with Pro Acrylic Burnt Red. You could use Mephiston Red if you want to use like Games Workshop paints, but any fairly bright red will be great for this. And we're just going to go around giving it 2 coats just over the jacket and the sleeves. One of the cool things you could do with this scheme is you could literally just reverse it. So you could do the trousers, etc. in red and give them a grey coat. But I wanted them to be quite punchy red. With the red done, I'm going to use dark gunmetal for the armour now from Vallejo model colour, because I want the metallics to be fairly dark. I want them to be a bit worn and battered. Lead belcher would probably work for this, and depending on how bright you want the armour, you could always, so later on we'll put a black wash over this. You could always put 2 coats of black wash to really dye it down, but I really like this dark gunmetal from Game Colour. And I'll be totally honest here, I don't know what that thing is on his back. I assume it's like ammunition or something. But I'm just going to paint the whole thing metal and then jazz it up later with some weathering effects, because I don't really know what it is. Next up, we're going to look at the browns. Lots of options here. I'm going to use Mournfang Brown because I know when I grime it down as such later, it reacts really well. And all I'm doing here is like the straps for his like braces for his ammo pack and belt, and like the webbing straps behind the boots. One thing to note is the braces sort of around the chest area can be quite tricky. So, you know, I don't want to tell you to suck eggs. It's be careful around there and use a much smaller brush. So once that's done, I moved on to the trousers and the coat. I used German grey for this. I know you're probably thinking you've used the same grey for 2 parts. It can look a bit naff, but I have a plan with the trousers, basically just to wash them down so they are still a darker tone to the jacket. I also realised at this point I didn't paint his boots, so I came back in with the Mournfang Brown to do them. Realised I wasn't a fan, so went back and changed them to Rhinox Hide, which, apologies, I don't have the footage for. Next up, I'm going to be doing the mask and the tubing. Great Hall Grey, Warpaints Fanatic. This is the only one I own currently. I was very impressed with this. Great coverage, really smooth. I'd heard they're good, but I just never got any. But I will certainly be trying out a few more. For the tube, I want it to be a slightly different colour to the mask. So I've gone in with Rackar Flesh, which is one of my absolute favourite paints. I pretty much use it on every model somewhere. So next up we're going to be picking out the gold, which is just the skull on the weapon, the Aquila skull on his helmet, and then like any buttons or accents you want to add. Retribute armor, I've loved this paint. I've got a soft spot for it. I know it gets a lot of hate, but I think it's got good coverage and it's got a nice warm tint to it, which will go very well with our red. At this point we're almost ready to wash him all over. There's just a few little pre-shady things I want to do first. One of them It won't show up too much on this, but I wanted to show you anyway, just for people who may not know. Mornfang Brown, it's one of those, when you water it down quite heavily, it looks fantastic as rust. It's a really nice little subtle rust. So I'll try and show you on this guy. So the next pre-shade before the oil wash is just going to be darkening down that silver. And we're just going to use a black wash, Nuln Oil or Pro Acrylic black wash. Whatever you've got to hand, it doesn't really make any difference. And we're just going to go all over the silver areas and the grey on the trousers. So that's him, ready for a uniform wash all over. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's bring out all the lovely oils. So you've got loads of choices here. You could go with a nice burnt umber, maybe add a touch of red to it. You could go with a classic sort of streak and grime. There are so many ways to do it, and they would all work and lend themselves to this colour scheme. I'm pretty much going to use streak and grime just because it's the most widely available to most hobbyists, but I will be adding a touch of Van Dyke Brown, VDB, which is phenomenal, and I would highly recommend getting it in your arsenal. But there are so many different ones you can use. If I was going to start out, I would get like an umber, your 3 primary colours, and a black and white, and then just have fun from there. But yes, Van Dyke Grey, I'm going to add a tiny bit to the streak and grime and thin it down a bit. I'm not going to use the streak and grime raw out the pot because it's just a bit too thick, and these have got really delicate details on. So that's what I'm going to do. So all I'm doing is putting a little bit of Van Dyke Brown on an old lid, adding a little bit of mineral spirits or thinning spirits. I've used the Winsor & Newton one. I've had it for ages now, and I'm just making it into this fairly watery consistency, like a light wash, and I'm just going to then bulk that up with streak and grime until I get it to the consistency I like, and I'm going to just paint it over the entire thing. And for those of you who haven't seen any of my videos before or haven't done any of the oil washing before, you don't need to varnish the model. You can do for safety if you wish, but to pull paint off the model when we remove some of this normally is from using too much pressure. That's why I always use the lovely little makeup sponges, because they're softer and it's just much easier to do. You can use a Q-tip or a cotton bud. A lot of people do, but I run into trouble with pulling paint off if I use those. So this is him dry, or dry enough. And you can see it's got this lovely matte finish. And I've got my little makeup sponge with a tiny bit of thinner on it, or mineral spirits. And all I'm going to do is start dragging away where I want that underneath colour to start popping. You could just leave him completely covered in grime, especially where it's slightly thinner. It is quite effective. But yeah, I'm just going to go start wicking it away to brighten him back up in sections. And once I'm happy with the level of oil that I've taken away, I'm just going to leave them to dry for a little bit longer, because I want to apply a second bit of streak and grime, and I don't want any residual thinner on there in case it smears. So once that's done, to save time, I'm going to start working on the base essentially. And all I'm doing here is using AK acrylics concrete, because I'm lazy and I don't have a darker grey. It goes on very light, but I intend to darken this down with a few contrast paints. So I'm coming back in with the streak and grime, and I'm just sponging this on now, looking to create battle damage and like spatter marks. Now, if you're going to highlight this miniature, I would highlight it before. I'm going to highlight it after, solely because I just wanted to show you the faster battle ready version, with a little extra flair of adding some specks of mud. But I will be highlighting it after to show you sort of the full version, which I like. Next up, eyeballs. Now I'm going to put my lovely zoom in specs on to do this, and I'm just going to use bright yellow green as a nice contrast to the red to make his little eyeballs pop. And this is him done for the quick battle ready version, and I would say just base him how you want, but if you want to see how I do it, let's go. So over the base, I'm just going to use a mix of Black Legion watered down and Garagax Sewer, just to create a nice grimy, dirty base, because I want it looking like he's been running through the trenches and there's all sorts of dark tones. But when I put the Black Legion on, I put it in patches, and then I try and just feather it out with a much wetter brush, just to try and add a bit more interest and depth to the base. I then bring out the best friend for any hobby painter, and that's the hairdryer. So after that, I'm going to use medium rust pigment powder to just add a bit of depth and make it look like the particular planet they're fighting on sort of resembles Mars, but I didn't want like a completely red planet base. So I dabbed it on where I wanted it slightly heavier, and then I did what I love doing with pigment powders, is just making it into sort of a wash essentially, by putting pigment fixer in with it into a little mixing dish, mixing it together, slapping it all over, and then getting the hairdryer out and watching it, you know, soak into the base. So with that done, here he is. Again, you could leave him here as a super like battle ready version. I think it looks quite effective, but I'm going to add just a few highlights to try and make him pop a bit more. Very simple. My process for doing this is essentially to use the base color or just one up from it. So red, I'm going to be using bold Pyral red from Pro Acrylic, but you could use Evil Sun Scarlet here and it will do the exact same thing. Now I'm not going crazy with these highlights. I'm picking out the uppermost edges, you know, the folds, the creases. And as I said earlier, ideally you'd want to do this before you did the extra bit of weathering with the streak and grime. But because I want to show you both versions, we're going to do it after, and it's fine. And the lovely thing about doing this is you don't have to have the cleanest lines. I almost think it looks slightly better when they're a little bit broken up, you know, a bit stop-starty. For these grey areas, I have used the original German grey and just added a tiny bit of the Great Hall grey to try and, you know, tie it in and still use it as a highlight colour. And I'm just really picking out the fingers and the edges. Nothing too special, just to try and give it a bit more shape. For the mask and the pipe, literally just the original base colours. So it's the Great Hall Grey for the mask, and then a touch of Rakkar Flesh over the highest points of the pipe. For the silver sections, you can use Stormhost Silver, any bright silver. I believe I am using Scale 75's Thrash Metal. And I'm really just trying to pick out some interesting edges because I still want the metal to look nice and dark. Once the metal is done, all I'm going to do is put a small recessed shade of Warp Lightning contrast paint around the eyes, just to try and make them stand out a bit more. And then that's it. I'm gonna rim him and then call him done. So here he is, Mr. Krieg Engineer, completely done. I hope you enjoyed this. It's quite a quick fire way of getting them on the table, and I think they look quite effective. If you didn't see my artillery video, I show you how to paint them in this sort of blue scheme. I plan on doing 2 more, a desert scheme and a jungle theme as well. If you stayed this long, thank you very much, and hopefully I will see you on the next one.